Hello everybody, and thank you to you all for joining us on today's webinar, which focuses on understanding the changes with the Pressure Equipment Directive. There are two of us from BSI on today's webinar. My name is Charlotte Brodie, and I'm the Sector Propositions Manager for Construction and Personal Safety, and I'm joined by Keith Stewart, our Technical Manager for PED and TPED certification.
Good morning everybody, my name's Keith Stewart, I'm the PED Technical Manager for BSI. I've been in the pressure equipment industry for in excess of 40 years and I've been around at BSI for the last 11 years, so I've been around and involved with the PED since its inception.
So this is what the agenda looks like today. Keith will start off by walking you through the current landscape for the PED, and then he's going to cover the changes in more detail, including the economic operators, the conformity assessment modules, the timelines and the support which is available from BSI. So Keith, I'm now going to hand over to you and we can start the webinar.
Okay, good morning everybody again. As you can see from the slides, the PED landscape has changed a little since the inception some 17 years ago. The PED was originally issued in 1997 as a European New Approach Directive and was enacted into law in the UK in July of 99 via Statutory Instrument with minor update in 2002. Since that time there have been no amendments to the directive. You may be aware there have been lots of guidelines, but there's been no formal amendments. So now it's been 17 years have passed. The Commission have decided to update the directive and align it with something called the new legal framework. I won't go into the detail of that, but if you wish to find more information, you'll find that in the 2014 Blue Guide, which you can download from the internet. The new directive was issued in June of 14. It's called a recast directive, and there is a transition period until the 18th of July next year when the new directive will apply. One special part of the new directive, Article 13, which relates to fluid classification, was effective 1st of June this year, and all manufacturers need to be aware of that and apply its rigours. So directives are not legislative acts. Every directive has to be enacted into law in the country or the individual EU country or member state. In the UK we enact directives as statutory instruments. The old statutory instrument for the PED was SI 1999-2000, which was amended in May 2002 via Statutory Instrument 2002-1267. The recent Article 13 from the new directive, which relates to the fluid classifications, was enacted via 2015 399 this year, and again all of these can be downloaded via the internet for information purposes. So what are the changes to the new directive and how does it affect you as manufacturers, users, etc.? There are some new responsibilities or bodies that are responsible within the new directive. The old directive referred to manufacturers and authorised representatives. The new directive now adds in importers and distributors. Each one of these individuals, if you like, is now an economic operator as defined by the new directive, and the responsibilities of each of these economic operators is cited in Articles 6, 7, 8 and 9 of the new directive. Importers and distributors will not be covered by notified bodies. However, they have legal obligations placed upon them in the new directive to ensure that the products placed on the market are compliant with the PED. So further changes have been made to the fluid classification. There was an old directive, 67548 EEC, which referred to fluid classification as two groups, Group 1 and Group 2. Group 1 covered what you would call, in a term that's probably not appropriate, but the more dangerous of the fluids: toxic, flammable, explosive, and there were 7 descriptors. Anything that wasn't Group 1 is a Group 2 fluid. So if it's not in Group 1, it was Group 2. If it's not in Group 1, it's a Group 2 fluid. The new CLP regulations came out in 2008, 1278, now cite 17 different descriptors for Group 1 fluids. And again, if it's not in a Group 1, it is Group 2. So essentially, there is no significant changes between Group 1 and Group 2, other than there are now 17 separate descriptors for Group 1. There may be 1 or 2 or more chemicals that were Group 1 that are now Group 2, and vice versa. However, we are not aware of any or not familiar with any specifics at this time. So the Conformity Assessment modules. This is how we ensure products are compliant with the PED. There have been a number of changes to the modules. The old directive refers to modules A1 and C1, whereas the new directive refers to modules A2 and C2. Both of these modules have been enhanced with explanations relating to the technical file requirements and notified body involvement. If you don't use module A1, C1 currently, then there's of no concern to you. However, if you do use modules A1 and C1, you will need to review the exact details of these new modules A2 and C2 to determine the impact on your business. On modules B and B1, which a lot of you may be familiar with, these are the design appraisal type modules. Previously, we had a module B EC type examination, which requires a prototype to be manufactured and verified by a notified body, technical file review and certification issued. And module B1, which is a desktop review only. The new directive cites module B only, there is no B1, and calls both types an EU type examination. So previously we had module B type examination. The new module will be module B type examination production type. So a production model will need to be manufactured and verified. So very similar to the original type examination. The old EC design examination, where we conducted a desktop review, is basically the same, but it's now called type examination design type. And there will be a 10-year validity period for for type examinations under design type. In addition, there are also some minor changes to the QA-based conformity assessment modules. These are D, D1, E, E1, H and H1, which now requires specific documentation to be submitted with the application, and additional requirements are imposed on the notified body's auditor competency/experience. And for modules H and H1, the manufacturer is required to provide technical documentation for one model of each type to be manufactured. This would only apply to new certification when issued, as previous manufacturers will already have all of their products reviewed and verified under their current QA-based assessment. Module H1, however, is now independent of Module H. It no longer refers or cross-refers to Module H. The old Directive 97/23 cited for Module H1, in addition to Module H, the manufacturer shall apply for design examination. That is now changed. Module H1 is independent and requires the manufacturer to apply for a design examination. This would appear to be a third type of certificate, independent of the new Module B design or production types. Further information will be available on this as we proceed along the next 6 months. So the critical point of the PED are the essential safety requirements. You'll be pleased to know there are very, very few changes to the essential safety requirements. Throughout the text of the existing essential safety requirements, the word must is used as a mandatory requirement. These have all been changed to shall. And under preliminary observation 3 in the old directive, it states the manufacturer is under an obligation to analyse the hazards in order to identify those which apply to his equipment on account of pressure. The new directive has the words and risks added. So it now says the manufacturer is under an obligation to analyse the hazards and risks. So your design personnel will need to take on board that statement and risks and decide how it affects your products. The directive was published in the Official Journal in June of 14. Article 13 of the PED, new PED 2014-68 came into force on the 1st of June and will require action from all certificate holders who issue declarations of conformity, as they will need to add that to their declaration. And then in 2016, the balance of the directive comes into force, subject to enactment into UK law as a statutory instrument. So as notified bodies, we cannot assess against the new directive until it's been enacted as a statutory instrument by the UK government. So what can you do as a business to move forward? You can read our white paper. You can carry out some self-awareness by reading the new directive and all the other information that is available on the web, i.e. the CLP regs. You can read the blue guide and the information in there. You will need to check all your procedures and processes and verify that they will meet the requirements of the new directive. You'll then need to put into place a plan of action, and should you have any specific issues which you cannot resolve yourself, you can discuss these with your appointed notified body. One point of interest is in the new directive. Article 48, Clause 3 of 2014-68 EU states that certificates and decisions issued by conformity assessment bodies or notified bodies under the old directive shall remain valid under the new directive. So any type examination certificates that you have in place, unless they require renewal, will remain valid. If they require renewal and reissue, then they will have to be issued under the new directive once it's enforceable. But we have a couple of questions at the moment. Do these changes impact on any of my procedures, processes or documentation? Yes. They will have a significant impact on your businesses where you are certificate holders, because any controlling procedures that cite the old directive and clauses. You'll need to amend and update to show the new directive on the relevant clauses. Declarations of conformity will need to be updated immediately to show compliance with 9723 EC and Article 13 of 2014-68 EU, because the effective date was 1st of June this year. And all this will need to be relatively sat waiting in the wings until the new directive is enacted as a statutory instrument. So you have basically 12 months to prepare, well 9 months now, to prepare and be organised. We have a question regarding the CLP regs. The CLP regulations replace the old CHIPS regulations. They provide detailed information relating to chemical labelling and packaging. There are now new hazard phrases, and information can be sought from the HSE website. The regulation introduced a division and categorisation structure for various different fluid types, with the aim of clearly and accurately identifying and marking, labelling and packaging for these fluids. So the PED has been updated to recognise these new categorisations, which is why there are 17 descriptors identified. We have another question regarding the June 15 deadline for Article 13. Article 13 of the directive relates to the classification of fluids. Previously they were classified via the old directive 67588, I think it was, and followed the CHIPS regulations. So the old risk phrases that were identified in various MSDSs use the CHIPS regs as their support. So where you had a fluid that was explosive, I think it was R7 or R8, something like that, the CLP regulations, which were written in 2008, so there's been some significant time, some 7 years, and these CLP regulations were effective 1st of June 2015. That was the deadline. For those of you who use standard gases like nitrogen, carbon dioxide, compressed air, there shouldn't be any change whatsoever. However, you will need to cite compliance with Article 13 of the new directive on your declarations of conformity in order to comply with those regulations, or to show compliance with those regulations. As we said, the CLP regulations have been around for some number of years, so it is a bulky document. If you want a bit of light bedtime reading, it's 1350 pages. I have a second question. Implications for distributors. These are clearly listed in Article 9 of the new directive, and they have legal obligations placed upon them to ensure that the product they are placing on the market is compliant with the PED. So distributors will need to ensure the products they are receiving are CE compliant and are provided with instructions and probably declarations of conformity. The exact details are shown in Article 9 of 2014-68 EU. And similarly for importers, the detail of the requirements or the obligations of importers are cited in Article 8 of the new directive. 2014-68 EU. I won't go into all the details, but it's a similar requirement. Importers are legally obliged to ensure that the product they are importing meets the requirements of the directive and can be CE marked if it hasn't already has been. So if you import product that isn't CE marked, then you may have difficulties ensuring it is PED compliant if you import it without. Okay, we have a question about harmonised standards. Current harmonised standards are still valid in the new directive, correct? The relevant harmonised standards are recorded and stored on the European Commission website. You can access those and determine which standards are current and are applicable to the new PED. Okay, I don't think we have any further questions.
Okay, so thank you very much, Keith. I hope that this information that's been shared today has been helpful to people, and we've had some really good questions that have come in over the last few minutes as well. So just a thank you to everybody for taking the time to join us. The information that you should now be able to see on your screen shows where you can find out more. We do have a dedicated web page for the new the PED, and you can also visit an additional website which gives you more information about the Pressure Equipment Directive. Our white paper was available as a handout from today's session. So if you have specific requirements, of course, our contact details are at the bottom of the screen as well. So all that remains is to say thank you really to Keith for sharing your information, and also thank you to everybody for taking part.